My name is Alexandra Reese. I'm 28 years old, and I'm a lieutenant in the United States Navy. I was born in a small coastal town, the daughter of a retired submarine captain and a civilian nurse who worked at the local naval base. My life has always been marked by military discipline and the sea. The airport incident happened only 3 weeks ago, but it feels like another lifetime ago. I was returning home after a 6-month deployment to the Mediterranean. Our ship, the USS Roosevelt, had completed a maritime security operation, and I was eager to breathe the familiar air of San Diego, where I'd been stationed for the past 2 years. My father, whom everyone calls Papa, decided to meet me in Dallas during my layover. He was still the same stubborn, proud man who had commanded men for 30 years. But now his skin was more wrinkled and his hair completely white. He hated to admit any weakness, especially in front of his daughter, who had followed in his footsteps. In the Navy, the Dallas airport was crowded that day. A storm had delayed several flights and crowds were thronging the shops and restaurants. Papa had gained access to the VIP lounge thanks to his retired military status, and we sat in a quieter area, drinking coffee and catching up. "How's your blood pressure, Papa?" I asked, noticing how he occasionally ran his hand over his chest. "Stop worrying, Alex. I'm fine," he replied with that familiar irritation. "Tell me about the mission. I heard you intercepted some smugglers." I began to tell him about our operation, keeping the details confidential, but sharing what bits I could. Papa always loved hearing stories from the sea. As he spoke, I noticed he was breathing more heavily than usual. "Are you sure everything is okay? Did you pick up your meds today?" Yes. Continue the story," he insisted, making an impatient gesture with his hand. I was about to continue when I noticed his face go pale. He reached into his coat pocket and began rummaging around urgently. "Daddy? My meds," he murmured, his voice suddenly weak. "I think they're all gone." It was then that I realized the gravity of the situation. My father had suffered from heart problems for years, but he rarely talked about it. He took nitroglycerin for angina, and from the look of panic in his eyes, I knew he was having a serious episode. "Where's your reservation?" I asked, standing up immediately. At the hotel." I thought I had enough. He tried to get up, but swayed slightly. People around began to stare. A flight attendant approached. "Is everything okay here?" "My father needs urgent medical attention," I explained quickly. "He has heart problems and has run out of medication." Panic began to spread across his face, and I recognized the signs he was entering an anxiety attack, which would only worsen his heart condition. "Calm down, Papa," he said, holding his hands tightly. "Breathe slowly. We'll figure this out." The flight attendant radioed for help, but reported that paramedics were treating another passenger on the other side of the terminal. That's when I heard my dad say, between gasps of breath, "Stand down." "Alex, I'm fine." That phrase, "stand down," was typical of him. A military order to retreat, to stop. Throughout my childhood and adolescence, whenever I showed concern or tried to help him, he would say it. It was his way of saying he was in control, even when he clearly wasn't. I looked at him and saw fear in his eyes, something I'd rarely seen before. Behind all that naval officer bravado lay a vulnerable man facing his own mortality. "No, sir," I replied firmly. "I will not back down this time." I stood up, feeling the military training take over. I quickly assessed the situation. The VIP lounge was full. A crowd blocked the way to the exit, and paramedics were on the other side of the terminal. "I need to clear a path to the paramedics," he said to the flight attendant. "Can you show me exactly where they are?" She pointed to the other side of the terminal and explained the way. I walked back to my father and crouched down in front of him. "Papa, I'm going to get help. Stay here with this lady," I told the flight attendant, "and try to keep your breathing slow and steady. I'll be back in 5 minutes." He tried to protest, but he was too weak. I left the lounge and entered the busy terminal. People walked distractedly, absorbed in their cell phones, dragging suitcases, forming an impenetrable human barrier. My years in the Navy taught me how to command attention and how to act in emergencies. "Excuse me," I shouted in a commanding voice. "Medical emergency. Make way." A few people looked over, confused, but they didn't move fast enough. I decided to be more direct. I began to move forward, gently but firmly pushing people away. Paramedics need to come through. Please, step aside. Slowly, a path began to open. I continued forward, directing people to the sides as if I were coordinating a rescue operation. I arrived at the area where paramedics were attending to another passenger. They were finishing stabilizing an elderly gentleman who appeared to have fainted. Navy officer. I quickly introduced myself. We have an emergency in the VIP lounge. Male, 65 years old, possible heart attack, no medication available. The more experienced paramedic nodded, understanding the urgency. We're done here. We can go, he said, motioning to his team. The path is blocked, I informed him. I can open a passage for you. I walked back the same way, this time ahead of the paramedics, making my way through the crowd. Emergency! Paramedics coming! I continued shouting, my voice clear and authoritative. People responded more quickly now, seeing the medical uniforms behind me. We arrived at the lounge in record time. Papa was paler, his breathing shallow but still conscious. The flight attendant had obtained a glass of water and was sitting next to him, monitoring his condition. Paramedics took over immediately. They checked his vital signs and administered oxygen and medication. He's going to need to go to the hospital, the chief paramedic informed me. It looks like unstable angina, possibly pre-infarction. I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. I'll go with him. As they prepared the stretcher, I approached my father. His eyes opened and he looked at me with a mixture of gratitude and vulnerability I'd never seen before. You disobeyed a direct order, he whispered, a slight smile on his lips. I learned from the best, sir, I replied, taking his hand. Sometimes you have to ignore orders to accomplish the mission. He squeezed my hand lightly, and I could see the pride in his eyes. It wasn't the usual pride in my performance in the Navy or in following in his footsteps, but a different kind of pride in becoming someone who knew when to act, even against his orders. As we walked him out of the terminal, I realized something had fundamentally changed between us. For years, I'd tried to earn his approval by meeting his every expectation, but in that moment, I earned his true respect by doing the exact opposite, defying his stand-down order and taking control of the situation. At the hospital, we learned he'd suffered a severe angina episode, but not a full-blown heart attack. Swift intervention had prevented further damage. As he slept in the hospital room, I reflected on how our family dynamic had always been shaped by military hierarchy. Papa grew up in a different era of the Navy, where emotions were seen as weakness. He brought this ethos into our family, creating barriers that were now beginning to crumble. I had been trained in the new Navy, where leadership also meant empathy, and where acknowledging vulnerability was part of strength, not its denial. As I watched his chest rise and fall with his now steady breathing, I realized the journey ahead would be about breaking new ground, not just physically as I had at the airport, but emotionally. Grounds through the defenses he'd built over decades in the Navy. Grounds toward a more honest father and daughter relationship, free from the rigidity of military hierarchy. It was at that moment, sitting beside the hospital bed, that I began to truly understand courage. Not just the courage to face physical danger or to lead men into battle, but the courage to face our own vulnerabilities and to let others see us as we truly are. The story didn't end at the airport. In fact, it was just the beginning of a much deeper and more meaningful journey that would forever change my relationship with my father, my understanding of what it means to be a Navy officer, and, most importantly, what it means to be human. In the following weeks, while Papa recovered, I had to reorganize my entire life. I arranged a temporary leave of absence from my Navy duties to assist with his recovery, something he initially resisted vehemently. I don't need a babysitter, he grumbled the day I brought him home from the hospital. His Annapolis home was spacious, but full of stairs and obstacles for someone recovering from heart failure. I'm not your babysitter, I'm your temporary medical officer, I replied with a smile. Consider this a special assignment. He snorted, but I caught a faint smile. Our dynamic was changing, slowly but surely. The first few days were the hardest. Papa insisted on doing everything himself, from bathing to preparing his meals, even when he clearly needed help. Every suggestion I made was met with an automatic stand-down, but now, instead of pulling away, I stuck with it. Look, Papa, he said during a particularly heated argument about his medication, We can do this the easy way or the hard way, but we're going to do it." He stared at me for a long moment, then let out a short laugh. "You sound like your mother when you talk like that," he said, his voice softening. It was the first time he'd mentioned my mother without that usual tension. She'd left us when I was only 12, unable to cope with life as the wife of a constantly absent submarine. "She was stubborn like you," he continued, surprising me. "Maybe that's why I fell in love with her." It was a small opening, a tiny crack in the armor he'd worn for so many years. I decided not to press, letting him determine the pace of these new revelations. Over the next few days, we established a routine. In the morning, I'd make coffee while he'd read the newspaper, then would take a short walk around the neighborhood, gradually increasing the distance as the doctor recommended. In the afternoon, he'd rest while I took care of some Navy business remotely. In the evening, we'd cook together, or rather, I'd cook while he critiqued my technique, insisting he'd learned better from the submarine cooks. During those weeks, we began to fill the empty spaces in our lives. He told me stories from his career that he had never shared before, not the heroic tales he used to repeat at family gatherings, but the real stories, the moments of fear when his submarine was trapped under Arctic ice for 48 hours, the guilt he felt when he lost 2 men during a storm in the North Sea, the loneliness of commanding people who depended on him but from whom he had to keep his distance. In return, I shared my own insecurities about my career in the Navy, doubts I'd never dared express before. I talked about the pressure of being one of the few women in a command position, about the times I questioned my decision, about the weight of responsibility. "You think I wasn't afraid?" he asked me one night as we sat on the porch looking at the stars. "Every commander is afraid. The difference is, we can't show it." "It's different for me," I replied. "I have to appear strong all the time without appearing too cold. It's an impossible balance sometimes." He was silent for a long moment. "Your mother said I was cold," he finally said, "that I brought the submarine's emotional distance home. She was right." I felt a lump in my throat. We had never spoken so openly about their divorce. "You did what you thought was right," I replied, not knowing what else to say. "No," he shook his head. "I did what was easiest. Keeping my distance is easier than being vulnerable. You're braver than me in that way, Alex." It was a moment of crystal clarity. My father, the legendary Captain Reed, admitting a failure. Not just a failure, but acknowledging my strength, something that would have been unthinkable before the airport incident. As the days turned into weeks, our relationship continued to evolve. I began to see beyond the facade of the rigid officer to the complex man beneath, someone who struggled with his own demons, who had made difficult choices and lived with the consequences, who had loved and lost. One morning, about 3 weeks after the incident, I found Papa rummaging through an old box in his office. When I approached, I saw he was looking at old photos of him and my mother at their wedding, me as a baby in her arms, our entire family in front of various monuments during the few vacations we managed to take. "She called me yesterday," he said without looking up. I froze. "Did Mom call?" He nodded. "She saw a news story about a former Navy officer with a heart condition in Dallas. Somehow, she knew it was me." I didn't know what to say. My mother had moved to Canada after the divorce and rarely kept in touch. She asked, "About you," he continued. "She said she'd like to see us. Both of us." I felt a whirlwind of emotion, hope, fear, anger, confusion. "What did you say?" He finally looked up, and I could see he was as conflicted as I was. "I said I'd have to ask you first." It was another moment of transformation. The Pope I knew would have made the decision alone without consulting anyone. This new respect for my autonomy, for my feelings, was something completely unexpected. "We need time to think," I replied. "Honestly?" He nodded, looking relieved. "Yes, we do." That afternoon, as we walked through the park near their house, he told me more about my mother, about how they met at a Navy dance, not a hospital, as he'd always claimed, about the happy first moments of their union, about how things began to fall apart. It was as if a dam had broken, decades of untold stories finally finding their way out. "The hardest part," he admitted, "was watching you grow up without her. I didn't know how to be both, a father and a mother. So I ended up just an officer commanding a recruit. You did the best you could, I replied, feeling an understanding I had never experienced before. No, I could have done more. I could have been more ... present. Even when I was physically there, my mind was always on the next submarine, the next mission. We stopped at a bench and sat down. The gentle autumn breeze rustled the leaves around us. Do you know what I thought when I saw you pushing your way through that crowd at the airport? He asked suddenly. What? I thought, that's my daughter, not a Navy officer, not an extension of me or my career, just ... my daughter. And I felt so proud I could barely breathe. Tears I hadn't known I'd been holding back began to stream down my face. It was all I'd ever wanted to hear, that he was proud of me for who I was, not for what I represented or the career I'd chosen. Daddy ... double quotes. Let me finish, he said, his voice firm but gentle. I spent so much time trying to make you a good officer that I forgot to support you as a person. And yet you've become better than I could have hoped, not just as an officer, but as a human being. You have the strength of the Navy, yes, but you also have compassion, something I lost somewhere along the way. We sat in silence after that, taking in the moment. It was as if a door had been opened, and now we couldn't close it. On the way home, he casually remarked, maybe we should call your mother, see what she has to say. I nodded, feeling a mixture of apprehension and hope. Maybe we should. That night, we did just that. The conversation was awkward, full of awkward pauses and bottled up emotions, but it was a start. We agreed that she would come visit us the following month. Another bridge being built, another path being opened. As I prepared for bed, I reflected on how drastically my life had changed in just what began as a moment of crisis. Papa, without his medication, in the midst of a panic attack, had become an opportunity for profound healing. I had paved the way not only for the paramedics that day, but for a new relationship with my father, and possibly my mother. In the Navy, we're trained to handle crises, to keep a cool head under pressure, to lead when others hesitate. No one teaches us how to navigate the turbulent waters of family emotions, how to navigate decades of unexpressed hurt, how to bridge the chasms that separated people who once loved each other. There was still much to explore, many difficult conversations ahead. Papa's recovery would be long, as would our journey of family reconciliation. But for the first time in a long time, I felt we had a reliable compass and a favorable wind. I fell asleep thinking not of Lieutenant Reeves, but simply of Alexandra, Thomas, and Catherine's daughter, sailing toward a future that, just weeks before, would have been impossible to imagine. My special leave was coming to an end, and I would soon have to return to San Diego. In my duties in the Navy, Papa was recovering well, rigorously following his new diet and exercise regimen and taking his medications without much complaint, but I still worried about leaving him alone. We were having breakfast when my phone rang. It was Commander Ellison, my immediate superior officer. Lieutenant Reeves, I answered formally, standing up and heading into the living room. Alexandra, how is your father? The commander's voice was warm, without its usual formality. Getting better every day, sir. Thank you for asking. Good, Ed, very good. There was a slight pause. I have a proposition for... My heart raced. In the Navy, proposals usually meant new assignments, transfers, or promotions. We're reorganizing some positions at the Naval Academy here in Annapolis, he continued. We need officers with field experience for advanced cadet training. Your name came up in conversation. I was momentarily speechless. A position at the Naval Academy? In Annapolis? It would be a lateral transfer, at least initially, the commander explained, but with potential for promotion in 12 to 18 months. Most importantly, it would allow you to be close to your father during his recovery. I felt a wave of conflicting emotions. On the one hand, the idea of being able to stay close to Papa during his recovery was enticing. On the other, I'd always been a field officer. I loved being at sea, facing real challenges, not teaching them in a classroom. May I? Think about it, sir. Sure, but don't take too long. We need an answer by Monday. After hanging up, I returned to the kitchen, where Papa was washing the dishes, a task he insisted on doing despite my protests. Everything okay? He asked, noticing my thoughtful expression. Yes, just a possible change of plan. I briefly explained the Academy's proposal. He dried his hands slowly, his face unreadable. "And what do you think?" I hesitated. "I don't know. I've always seen myself as a officer. Teaching wasn't in my plan." He nodded understandingly. "The best teachers are those who have real experience to share." "But it's different," I argued. "At sea, I'm making a direct difference." "I'm running away?" he suggested softly. The word hit me like a punch. "What do you mean?" Papa sighed and sat down at the table, indicating for me to do the same. "Alex, when you chose the Navy, I was proud, but also worried. Worried that you were following in my footsteps not just for the love of service, but to escape the complications of civilian life. That's what I did, after all." I opened my mouth to protest, but he held up his hand. "Let me finish. The sea is a great place to hide. Missions, hierarchy, protocols, everything is clear, defined. Not like relationships, family, all those confusing things that don't follow a manual." His words touched something deep inside me. I'd never considered my Navy career as a form of escape, but there was an uncomfortable truth in his words. "I'm not saying accept or decline," he continued. "I'm just suggesting that you consider why the idea of teaching, of staying in one place, feels so uncomfortable." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying my conversation with Papa, Commander Ellison's proposal, and the entire journey I had traveled up to that point. I thought about how I felt, making my way through the airport, leading the paramedics, the clarity of purpose, the adrenaline of the emergency. But I also thought about the weeks that followed, the conversations with Papa, the reconnection with my mother over the phone, the plans for her visit. There was a depth and richness to these interactions that my sea missions rarely provided. The next morning, I found Papa on the balcony, watching the sunrise with a cup of coffee in his hands. "I think I'll accept the position at the academy," I announced, sitting down next to him. He glanced at me sideways. "Are you sure? I don't want you to do this just because of me." "It's not just for you," I replied honestly. "It's for me too. I think I need to learn to open other kinds of pathways, not just in emergency, but in everyday life." He smiled, a genuine smile he rarely showed. "It'll be nice to have you around, but if you change your mind after a few months, I'll understand." "Thank you, Papa." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun gradually illuminate the garden. A new mission was beginning, not at sea, but here on land, with equally significant challenges. On Monday, I called Commander Ellison and accepted the position. 2 weeks later, I was officially installed on the faculty at the Annapolis Naval Academy, teaching advanced navigation tactics and crisis leadership. The first few days were strange. Instead of the deck of a ship, I navigated the Academy's historic halls. Instead of ordering around seasoned sailors, I mentored young cadets eager for knowledge. And, instead of the constant roar of the sea, my daily soundtrack was the murmur of academic discussions and with the occasional chime of a bell marking the hour. Surprisingly, I adapted more quickly than I expected. I discovered I had a natural aptitude for teaching, translating practical experiences into understandable lessons. The cadets responded well to my direct approach and real-life field stories, rather than dry textbook theory. Lieutenant Reeve, a cadet, approached me after a particularly intense lesson on sea rescue. That story about the rescue in the Mediterranean... How did you deal with the fear? The question caught me off guard. At sea, no one asked about fear. Everyone pretended it didn't exist. "With respect, Cadet," I replied after a pause, "it's not about not being afraid. It's about recognizing it as useful information and moving forward anyway." I saw something shift in his eyes, a deeper understanding of what it meant to be an officer. It was a different kind of impact than I was used to, more subtle, but potentially more lasting. At home, Papa and I fell into a new routine. He had started working part-time as a submarine design consultant, something that kept his mind sharp without the physical stress of his previous. Sometimes I'd find him surrounded by blueprints and technical specifications, completely absorbed, a more relaxed version of the captain he used to be. On weekends, we explored Annapolis together, the maritime museums, the waterfront parks, the small historic restaurants. Occasionally, we'd run into old, colleagues of his, and I watched with fascination as the dynamic changed. He still commanded respect, but there was a gentleness in his interactions that hadn't existed before. A month after starting at the academy, my mother visited. She arrived on a sunny Sunday, her car pulling up in front of the house with almost palpable hesitation. 20 years had passed since we were all together under the same roof. Papa and I waited on the porch, both nervous but determined to make it work. When she got out of the car, I was struck by how well she looked. Her hair was now completely gray, but her smile was exactly as I remembered. "Alexandra," she said, hugging me tightly. "My Navy officer." Then she turned to Papa, and I saw something pass between them, not renewed romance, but a mutual recognition, a silent truce after years of Cold War. "Thomas," she said simply, "are you okay?" "I'm getting better," he replied, his voice softer than usual. "Come in, please." Alex made lemonade. Bridges being built. Mom told us about her life in Vancouver, where she had become a university literature professor. Papa spoke about his career without the usual filters, admitting mistakes and regrets he'd never shared before. I served as a sort of mediator, but also as an active participant, bridging the gaps of 2 decades of separation. On the last night of her visit, we were sitting in the back garden under the stars, with a nearly empty bottle of wine between us. "You two are so different," my mother commented. More ... open. Papa and I exchanged glances. "We had a scare," he replied simply. "More than that," I insisted. "We learned to push through things that blocked us." My mother smiled, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I wish I could have been there to You're here now," I replied, holding his. "That's what matters." The next morning, as we drove her to the airport, I felt something fundamental had shifted. We were no longer a broken family, but 3 individuals who had found a new way to connect. Not perfect, certainly unconventional, but real. "Come back for Christmas," Papa suggested as we said goodbye. "If you want." "I would love to," she replied, looking as surprised as I was by the invitation. On the way back home, Papa was unusually quiet. "Is everything okay?" I asked, worried that the visit had been too much for her still healing heart. "Yes," he replied slowly, "just thinking about how curious fate is. If I hadn't forgotten my medicine that day at the airport ... double quotes, he left the sentence incomplete. But I understood perfectly. That moment of crisis had been a catalyst for transformations none of us could have foreseen. 6 months passed quickly. At the academy, I gained a reputation as a demanding but fair instructor, someone who prepared cadets for the real challenges of naval service, not just exams. I developed a special course on crisis leadership, inspired in part by the airport incident, teaching future officers how to remain calm and make effective decisions under extreme pressure. At home, Papa was unrecognizable compared to the stubborn man who had ordered him to stand down half a year earlier. His physique was stronger thanks to a strict diet and daily exercise, but the most significant change was internal. He had learned to talk about his feelings without embarrassment, to ask for help when he needed it, to show vulnerability without feeling like he was betraying some unwritten military code. Our house had become a hub of social activity, something unheard of when I was growing up. Papa's former classmates came over for dinner regularly, as did my new academy classmates, and even a few cadets selected for informal mentoring sessions. My mother called weekly and was making plans to spend Christmas with us, as promised. One Friday afternoon, I was conducting a rescue drill with my advanced class when my phone vibrated with a message. It was from Captain Rodriguez, my former commanding officer on the USS Roosevelt. "I need to talk to you urgently. Can you call me when you're I felt that familiar rush of adrenaline, the feeling that something important was about to happen. As soon as class ended, I called him from my office. "Alex," he answered immediately. "How's academic life?" "Surprisingly good," I replied honestly. "What happened?" He got straight to the point, as always. "We're assembling a special task force for a humanitarian mission in Southeast Asia. The region has been devastated by a Category 5 typhoon. I need experienced officers to coordinate evacuations and supply delivery. I thought of you immediately." I felt an immediate internal conflict. A real rescue mission, people in need of help, The chance to make a direct difference again was exactly the kind of work I love, but it also meant leaving Papa, the academy, the new life we had built. How long? I asked. 3 months, possibly 4. Leaving in a week, I promised to respond within 24 hours and hung up, my mind racing. When I got home that night, Papa immediately noticed something was different. What happened? He asked as we prepared dinner together. I explained the phone call, the humanitarian mission, and Captain Rodriguez's invitation. As I spoke, I watched his face carefully, expecting to see disappointment and concern. Instead, I saw understanding. You'll accept, won't you? He asked when I finished. I don't know, I replied hesitant. Your health? The academy, ... He put down the vegetable knife and turned to face me fully. Alex, you didn't choose the Navy to escape as I suggested before. You chose it because you want to help people, to make a direct difference. It's who you are. I felt a lump in my throat. But what about you? I'm fine, he smiled. As fine as an old sailor with a patched up heart can be. I have friends, I have my consulting job, and your mother will be here for Christmas. Don't worry about me. I'm scared, I admitted, finally expressing what was really bothering me. What if something happens to you while I'm away? What if ... what if the sky falls? He added, using a phrase he'd used to say when I was a child and worried much. We can't live in fear of what might happen, Alex. You taught me that. We talked late that night, weighing the pros and cons, discussing logistics, making emergency plans. In the end, we both knew what my decision would be. The next morning, I called Captain Rodriguez and accepted the assignment. Over the next week, I organized my replacement at the academy, prepared the house, and made sure Papa had everything he would need during my absence. The day before I left, we had a small farewell dinner with some close friends. After everyone left, Papa and I sat on the porch, as we had done so many times over the past few months. I have something for you, he said, handing me a small box. Inside was a thin silver cord with a small pendenta, meticulously compass. It was your grandmother's, he explained. She gave it to your mother when we got married, and your mother gave it back to me when you were born. It should have been passed down to you a long time ago. I was speechless, holding the delicate compass in the palm of my hand, so that you always find your way back home, he continued, his voice slightly choked. Whatever path you need to make. Tears filled my eyes as he placed the necklace around my neck. It was the perfect gift, not just for its symbolism, but because it represented a new understanding between us. He was no longer trying to keep me safe, telling me to retreat. Instead, he was giving me tools to navigate myself, acknowledging my ability to find or create my own path. Thank you, Papa, I whispered, hugging him. I'm proud of you, Alex, he replied, his voice firm now. I always have been, but I didn't always know how to show it in the right way. The next morning, he drove me to the naval base where I would embark for my new assignment. On the dock, amid the chaos of sailors saying goodbye to their families, equipment being loaded, and officers shouting orders, we had our own quiet farewell. Take care of yourself and take care of your men, he said, the old captain briefly visible in his posture. Yes, sir, I replied with a smile, saluting out of habit. He returned the salute, then did something he had never done in public. He hugged me tightly. I love you, daughter, he said simply. I love you too, Papa. As I walked up the ramp to the ship, I looked back one last time. He stood there, straight and proud as the naval officer he would always be, but also open and vulnerable as the father he was learning to be. I waved, and he waved back. As the ship left the harbor, I stood on deck watching the Annapolis coastline fade into view. I touched the compass around my neck, feeling its comforting weight. Was I afraid of what would come next? Yes, but I was also anxious, ready for the challenges, because I finally understood what Papa had been trying to tell me all those years ago when he encouraged me to be strong, to not show weakness. It wasn't about repressing emotions or keeping my distance from people. It was about finding the courage to do what needed to be done, even when it was difficult. That day at the airport, when he said stand down and I refused, he had opened a new kind of path, a path through the fear, the tradition, the rigid hierarchy that had defined our relationship for so long, a path to a more authentic connection, to healing, to mutual understanding. And now, as I sailed for a mission where I would literally open pathways for people in need, I took with me not only my naval training and field experience, but also the deeper lessons of those 6 months with Papa. That true strength included vulnerability. That effective leadership required empathy. That sometimes the bravest thing to do was to ignore a direct order and follow your heart. The horizon opened before me, vast and full of possibility. I didn't know exactly what I would find in the turbulent waters of Southeast Asia, or what kind of officer and person I would be when I returned. But I knew that, whatever the challenges, I was equipped to face them, to forge a path through them, and eventually, to find my way back home. The mission in Southeast Asia was everything I expected and more. The typhoon had devastated entire coastal communities, destroying critical infrastructure and leaving thousands of people isolated. Our task was twofold: delivering emergency supplies and coordinating evacuations from areas that remained at risk due to landslides and flooding. As an operations officer, I oversaw daily rescue and delivery plans, constantly adapting our strategies as new information came in. It was exhausting work, but deeply rewarding. Every family safely evacuated, every child receiving medical care, every community reconnected with the outside world, all of it reminded me why I had joined the Navy in the first place. The skills I'd honed at the airport coping through chaotic situations, remaining calm under extreme pressure proved invaluable. On one particularly tense occasion, I led a small team through a partially submerged village to rescue a group of elderly people trapped in a nursing home. The path was blocked by debris and treacherous currents, but we managed to create a safe route and evacuate everyone without casualty. "How do you do it?" asked a young non-commissioned officer after the operation, clearly impressed. "Keep a cool head when everything is falling apart?" I thought about Papa, about his heart attack, about how I had faced my own fear that day. "Accept fear as information, not as an obstacle," I replied. "And remember that the path is rarely completely blocked. Sometimes we just need to look at it from a different perspective." During his rare downtime, he kept in touch with Papa via email and occasional satellite calls. He seemed to be thriving. He continued his exercise routine, had expanded his consulting work, and was even helping organize a support group for naval veterans with heart problems. "Your mom decided to come early," he told me during one of our calls. "She's staying for a whole month, not just for Christmas." "That's unexpected," I commented, trying to understand what that meant. "For all of us," he laughed. "But it's good. We're talking a lot, filling in the gaps, understanding what went wrong. It's healing." The idea of my parents rebuilding some kind of relationship, even if it was just friendship, was surprising but comforting. Another path being opened, another bridge being built. 3 months turned into 4, as predicted, and then into 5 when a second storm hit the region. When we finally received orders to return, it was a bittersweet feeling. We were exhausted and eager to get home, but also aware of how much work still needed to be done. The night before we set sail, I was approached by a local woman who had worked as a translator for our team. She was carrying a small package wrapped in colorful fabric. "To you, Officer Reeves," she said in halting English, "from all the families in Tanjung Village." Inside was an intricately carved wooden sculpture, boat sailing through stormy waves, guided by a female figure at the bow. "They say you're like Dewy Lot, the goddess of the sea," explained, "the one who makes a path through the waters when no one else." I was deeply touched by the gift and the sentiment behind it. I didn't see myself as a goddess or a heroine, just someone doing their job. But I understood what the symbol meant to them: hope amid despair, possibility where there seemed to be none. When we finally returned to American waters, I felt that familiar thrill of seeing the shoreline approaching. This time, however, it was different. I wasn't just returning to duty, but to a real home, to people I loved, and who loved me not just for what I did, but for who I was. Dad and Mom were waiting on the DACA site I never imagined I'd see again. They were arm in arm, not romantically, but with the familiarity of old friends who'd found peace with each other. "Welcome back, sailor," Papa smiled, using my old childhood nickname. "We're so proud of you," my mother added, hugging me tightly. I looked at them, my father, the submarine captain who had learned to wear his heart on his sleeve, my mother, the teacher who had found the courage to return, and myself, the naval officer who had discovered that breaking through wasn't just about moving physical obstacles, but emotional ones as well. "It's good to be home," he said simply. That evening, sitting on the porch as we had so many times before, I shared stories from the mission while Papa and my mother updated me on their lives. There was an ease in our conversation that we had never experienced as a family. Commander Ellison called Papa, mentioned casually, "The Academy wants you back. They're offering a promotion chief of the Tactical Operations Department." "What about the USS Roosevelt?" I asked, surprised. I had assumed it would return to active duty after it. "Apparently your work in Asia impressed a lot of important people," he smiled. "Now you have options." Option. The word resonated within me. For so long, I had seen my career as a linear path, missions, eventually command. But now I realized there were many ways to serve, many paths to explore. "I'll think about it," I replied. Later, after my mother had gone to bed, Papa and I lay awake, looking at the stars. "You know what I realized during that mission?" I commented. "That when I fought my way through the corridors of that airport to get to the paramedics, it wasn't just an isolated, it was the beginning of something bigger." He nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes a single act of courage triggers many others." Exactly. And it wasn't just about saving you that day, although that was crucial, I continued. It was about recognizing that I had the ability to create pathways where none existed before, not just physically, but emotionally, between people, through stories we thought were immutable. Papa smiled, his eyes reflecting the stars above. "That's exactly what the best officers do, Alec. They don't just follow orders or protocol, but find new paths when necessary. That's why you'll be an extraordinary officer, whether at the academy or at sea." I felt the compass around my neck, a constant reminder of where I came from and all the possible directions I could go. "Thank you for letting me disobey that order," she said softly. He laughed. "It's not like I have a choice. You're stubborn like your old father." We laughed together, and then we sat in comfortable silence, gazing up at the night sky. The future stretched out before us, not as a single predetermined path, but as an ocean of possibility, some calm, some stormy, all waiting to be navigated. I didn't know exactly what course I would choose next, but I was at peace with that uncertainty, because I had learned the most important lesson, that the most meaningful paths are not the ones we find, but the ones we create through fear, through doubt, through outdated expectations and artificial limitations. And wherever my Navy career took me next, I would carry this truth with me as an infallible compass, that true courage lies not in never feeling fear, but in moving forward in spite of it, blazing a trail not only for yourself, but for all who come after. My father had taught me to be strong, life had taught me to be human, and that day at the airport, when I refused his order to stand down, I had learned that sometimes the greatest strength lies in defying those we love, not out of rebellion, but out of an even deeper love. And in that, I finally found my true mission as a U.S. Navy officer, not just to defend and protect, but also to connect, heal, and transform, one path at a time. And